Hello and welcome to GameGuru Classic and Max broadcast number 108, and you are joining me as I delve a little bit into some internal developments and news about the GameGuru universe. But before any of that, I want to do a quick sound check just to make sure that everyone can hear me loud and clear. I must also add a codicil to this broadcast in that my dog Jack is joining me. He's panting away. You might call him a hot dog. So if you hear any squealing like that, there's nothing I can do about it. Cannot muzzle him, and I can't even put the air conditioning on because it's too loud for the broadcast. So we're all suffering over here. So be kind with your questions. Which brings me on to the format of this broadcast. The first part is some demos, or Lee rabbiting on, and then the second part is Q&A, where I'll answer some questions that have been posted during the live chat. I'm also joined today with team members who will try and answer those questions in advance, and any questions I cannot answer remotely, I'll answer in person in the second part, which is the Q&A. So without further ado, let's crack on so I can show you some really cool things. The first part is the demo section, and that is subdivided into two parts, which is, of course, GameGuru Classic, and the second part of the first part is GameGuru Max. So what do I have to talk about in GameGuru Classic land? Well, I'm really pleased about that. Oh yeah, I just skipped the part where I could find out whether anyone could hear me or not. I have recently updated my sound card drivers, screwing everything up, and yeah, great that you can hear me. Thank you very much for responding. I guess it was Jack's whine that kind of distracted me there and caused me to skip a line. So you'll probably see my screen, and at the bottom of the screen there is an icon that I have never shown before in over 100 broadcasts. It's the old faithful GameGuru Classic. What's so great about GameGuru Classic, I hear you ask? Well, we're doing an update next week. I think we've set the date for the 15th, which is early next week. And what we want to reveal, the main thing, really, is that it's 64-bit. That's right. We have gone to the trouble of throwing away the 32-bit as rubbish, and we've added 64-bit, which is great. A lot of benefits to 64-bit. I think chief amongst them is it breaks the previous 3GB limit on system memory usage, which limited how big each level of your game could be. You can have much larger levels now, thanks to we're running 64-bit, and we've joined the real world. So check that out. It's going to be announced next week. So once you see the announcement, you can click the link, or just go to Steam and update it there, and you'll be up to date with the latest version. But it ain't just 64-bit. We have a few extra nice things. And I must make a big thank you right at the start to Preben and Cybernescence. They've basically done the lion's share. I certainly edged the 64-bit repository along, but it was Preben and Cybernescence who took the bull by the horns and took it the rest of the way, making it super solid. Standalones work, the software works, and they couldn't resist adding some features along the way, and I wasn't about to complain. So I want to show you some of those features, or at least the ones I could find when I was pouring through the code commits. So hopefully this background noise isn't too loud, it's just some jungle noises. But the first thing...
buddy, you ready to blow this joint?
Yes.
I can't help you with those guards, but if you can get to the extraction point, I'll pick you up from there.
Me versus an undetermined number of bad guys?
What could go wrong? Okay, so the first thing I want to reveal is the the post-process screen space ambient occlusion system has been improved from regular SSAO to HBAO. What does all that mean? You see those rocks interacting with the floor? If I change the intensity to nothing, that's it without screen space ambient occlusion. If I increase the intensity, you can see the contribution. Now obviously you can get crazy, it's too much at that, and you can change the radius and other settings, but that allows you to create shadows in real time out of thin air. Uses the depth buffer of the render pass in order to create that. And what it does, it gives you a lot more visual quality without necessarily spending a lot of extra performance to get you there. And it's done in real time, so there's no pre-baking or pre-processing required. So HBAO is pretty cool. Glad to be able to show that off. You may also have spotted a few other things. There's now a saturation. Let me just change the view a little bit. There's a saturation slider added to the post-process effects. Saturation is basically how much colour do you want in your scene. No colour, grayscale, art noir. And then full-on saturation, so it really magnifies all the colorificness. So I'll just leave that where it was. I think it was there. And then a sepia value. Don't ask me what sepia is. I think you're going to have to Google that one. But we have a sepia slider. Maybe someone requested one. So there it is. Happy days. So those are manual control. There is also something I do remember was requested from the GameGuru Classic community, which is the LUT selections. So right now we've got it under none, but I can change to all of these different LUT, and what that means, there's a regular color input, and then the LUT algorithm modifies those colors based on different spectra, and then it outputs the final thing as part of your post process. Some are subtle, some are ridiculous, and you get to pick which one suits the style and the theme and the narrative and the emotion of your game, and you can pick the one you like and use it. There's some Hulk LUT setting there. Let me get back to none, which is the default, so LUT is not being put in at this stage. So that's that. Pretty happy with that implementation. And anyone who's got GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max will probably find that the LUTs match. So the LUT bank in Classic is the same as the LUT folder in Max. So just wanted to show you that in the demo. And of course, as we continue with GameGuru Classic updates, I think you're probably getting the hint now that it's not just about bug fixes anymore. We are going to start adding some functionalities to GameGuru Classic at the same time as we're going to prepare the pipeline so you can smoothly take your project from GameGuru Classic to GameGuru Max over time at a time of your choosing. Most people, I think, will probably want to do that when we get to version 1 on GameGuru Max, and by then we'll have a pretty decent pipeline so you can take what you've got in GameGuru Classic, load it up in GameGuru Max, see what it looks like, see if you can make any improvements, and you can do it at the time of your choosing. So those are the things I wanted to show you, but one last piece of news before we move on to GameGuru Max is that this is available right now. I have uploaded the builds, I've done a bit of testing, not extensive testing, but I've made sure it all works, and I've put it up as a beta build and a public preview build. So if you go into GameGuru Classic and you change your Steam build to one of those two, you can play with the 64-bit version right now. Maybe you can act as my testers over the weekend, and next week hopefully it'll be super solid and we'll release it to everybody else as part of the regular latest GameGuru Classic version on Steam. So that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of GameGuru Classic. Without further ado, let's move swiftly on to GameGuru. Where's my cursor? Oh, I'll tell you why it is. It's Classic not giving me my cursor back. Okay, moving on to Max. Okay, we now suddenly transport ourselves to GameGuru Max Land. Anyone who's been keeping tabs with our recent announcements, last week we launched a screenshot competition. I'm really pleased with the take up on that. I think everyone got into the spirit of the thing. We've had many entries, and I look forward to revealing a lot of those entries in the next weeks. But we had a job to do, and the job is kind of still ongoing, to pick 5 winners. And we're going to announce those winners on Friday as part of an announcement and issue prizes to those 5 winners. Really stiff competition, actually. You know, there was something like 12 winners wanted to award, but because of the rules, we had to pick 5. So we're still doing some internal debates as to who quite pips the other ones. So I look forward to revealing more on that come Friday, and hopefully reveal, if we get permission from the other entrants, permission to show more entries. The entries that didn't quite get into the top 5 but are definitely worthy mentions, and we'll find a medium in which to present those so you can check out a wide variety of final screenshots that people prepared within GameGuru Max using nothing but stock, the assets that come with GameGuru Max. And the reason I've booted up GameGuru Hub is I want to show you something that we had have also announced this week, but maybe you don't believe me until I show. So let me just bring up Game 2. I think this was the... I use this to do my tests for one of the updates. Don't worry too much about the crazy animations going on, but what you end up with is some soldiers from the future landing in a snowy environment. I've set all of the guys to allies and all of the girls to enemies. The guys have hammers, the girls have laser pistols. It's a hell of a fight. I made these guys strong as well, so they're going to get completely slaughtered because everyone else has got weapons and all they got is some domestic hammer. But that ain't what I want to show. What I want to show, apart from the wonderful view, is if you go to the menu at the top, this particle editor. I dare say some people already know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it to the rest. Thanks to a lot of feedback, very valuable feedback from the community, it was decreed and decided we will not sell functionality during early access of GameGuru Max. It's silly. Why would we do that? Well, we did it, but we decided to undid it. So now the particle editor tool is now built into GameGuru Max Core. So if you've got GameGuru Max, just go into that menu that I just showed you, run the particle editor, and it launches up. And you get all of these particles effects out of the box. Of course, it's the particle editor, so you can create any particle you want. That's kind of what the tool is about. And what we've done, for anyone who's already bought the particle editor, we've renamed that to the particle booster pack. And in there, you'll find the other 200, and I think it's 240 effects. That actually was the entire library that came with the particle editor. So anyone who's already got the particle editor or new users who buy the particle booster pack will get a full library of 270 particle effects. But the particle editor tool that's now built into GameGuru Max will have these, which I think is 28 particles just to get you started. And of course you can pick one and then modify it, change the colour. It's not disabled, it's not restricted anyway. It's the full particle editor tool, and you can create any particle you want. It's just for those who don't really want to sit down and create 200 particles, the booster pack fills out this library with 240 more effects for you to play with. So it's a pretty significant move on our part. We also had plans to do more functionality inside DLC. We've scrapped those plans. When you see a DLC on Max, it will just be assets, models, textures, things you'd find on an asset store, on a 3D model store out there in the wild. But any functionality, it goes in the core. Anything that you would want to do, even if you have to put a little effort into, say, scripting or art, you will be able to do in the core. Absolutely zero need to go out and buy a DLC to gain that functionality. I think it's the correct thing to do, it's the right thing to do, and we're doing it. So I wanted to mention that because it's a pretty significant turning point, and it gives you an idea of what you expect from us in the future. So now that's my little show and tell. I'd like to smooth into the next section, which of course is the Q&A, where I answer some of your questions. Okay, let me just get back to the hub because I think it looks pretty. And then I'm going to dig out the pop-out chat. I'm going to look for an orange, which is Zach's way of giving me the first question that was not able to be answered sufficiently. So maybe Lee can answer it sufficiently. So here we go. Just checking the clock. I'm about 15 minutes in. That's great. We're keeping it nice and snappy. So let's maybe put 10 minutes into questions, or rather answers. When will we be able to make our own custom in-game UI? You can do that up to a point. I know you already know this. The question implies something deeper. But anyone who just sees this question for the first time may not know that you can customize certain elements of your game UI, such as your loading screen, title screen, in-game menu screen, and all that kind of thing. You can change the fonts, the size, the colors, the images, etc. But the one thing you can't do is add a new thing onto this screen. You can't have a fifth button, because that implies this fifth button does some function. Well, what does the function do? And how do you decide the logic of that function? And that's why we stopped at giving you sort of the fixed places. You can just change what's here. I think the question leads on to, well, we want to create our own screens. And that will come, that big thing will come when we start working on the RPG game genre. Because you are going to need the ability to create your own inventory screens, crafting screens, other kinds of game mechanics screens you would find more in, say, an RPG or a puzzle, and less so in an out-and-out pure shooter. So we're doing it. It actually has to be done in order for us to do RPG in such a way that it's not just hard-coded. So keep an eye out for that in and around when we start talking more and more about RPG. Next question from the live chat. Can you give us a timeline on when the RPG tools will be available? Test. I've just did that test because, as I said, I've updated my drivers, and if the recording software put different microphones on different devices, I may have been talking to myself. But it looks like the voice bleepy thing is bouncing around, so it's definitely responding to my voice. So let me repeat that question because I've completely forgotten it already. Can you give us a timeline on when the RPG tools will be available? Rather convenient. No timeline. We're going to do VR next. Doing some work around VR and performance. I think that's also been long anticipated. And it's a 2-for-1. By doing VR, we have to do performance. And anyone who's not interested in VR is interested in performance. Jack, quiet. Later. He wants a what? That's what he wants. He's heard the word now. He's giving me the evils. 8 more minutes, Jack. We'll be right. Okay, so there is no timeline, but I can certainly tell you the order. Performance, VR, together. Then RPG, then puzzle. So when you see those things done, you know you're closer to the RPG, which I assume a lot of people are so looking forward to. And before you start getting into it, RPG isn't a separate island. Once RPG mechanics go in, you can start mix and matching bits of shooter, bits of RPG. A game that's mostly shooter, a game that's mostly RPG. You can mix and match. That's the whole point of this game maker. Third question. Will Max ever support using decal textures for 3D objects instead of the default plane? Decal textures for 3D objects. So you got a 3D object and you want a decal texture on it. There's something called alt texture, where you can change the texture of a 3D model. There's also something else that I'm going to add called decal projections, where you can get a decal and project it on to a 3D model. That'll be super useful for more convincing explosion scorch effects, bullet holes, blood splats, a few other edge cases. So those are the 2 answers that might just answer the question. Obviously, I've been told off before about providing an answer that has nothing to do with the question. So I apologise if I've missed the mark on question 3. Question 4, which was asked a while back. My question for Classic is, can we modify those new slider values via Lua? That's a great question. Answer, no idea. I suspect not. I did scroll through every line of code commit and I didn't see a lot of activity around the Lua system. But you're right, if it isn't there, it should be there. Maybe not necessarily a bug, but everything else that you saw on that tab screen, you have access to a command in script, so you can change that to suit what's going on in your game. For example, maybe you have a section in your game where you fade it to black and white, so you can tell sort of like a piece of story from the past, and when that's finished, you fade it back into colour and you carry on playing the game. You can only really do that if you have access to it via the Lua scripting command. So if it ain't in there, and you can certainly check it out now in the beta and the public preview, if it ain't there, let me know. It's not a big job to add them, but if I don't know, they'll never get added. Or if, let's say thanks to Preben and Cybernescence, maybe they pick up on that and then add it before I even get to see if it's there or not. Okay, another question. Will feature like baked lights be added, or will it always stay in real-time lighting? We already have a light mapper in GameGuru Classic. So it's the function keys F2, F3, F4, if I recall. I think, actually you have to hold down Shift now. It's a little protection. So every time you're in test game, hold down Shift and press F2, F3 or F4. And it will give you different degrees of light mapping. That light mapping pre-calculates all the static lights in your scene, creates light maps and applies those to your scene. In some instances, it will improve your performance, but in all cases, it generally looks better because pre-calculated lights, you can do a lot more ambient occlusion tricks and better shadows with nice feathery edges, etc. So just check that out. Shift F2, F3, F4. It's buried in there. I've also just realised we're talking about Classic and Max now in our broadcast. Maybe in the question, pop in Classic or Max, just so I don't go off on a tangent and I don't really satisfy the question with a suitable answer. Here's a real question, a real-time question. Do you think you should team up with, what's this? Vroid Studios, question mark. I've never considered teaming up with Vroid Studios. Please someone send me a link so I can find out what Vroid Studios is, and I apologise if I should know, but don't. Pretty busy and hot this time of year. Okay, another question. You've mentioned before that you want to make changes to the logic flow window. What sort of changes do you want to make and when might we see them? Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what the logic flow window is, I don't call it that, I call it my behavior editor. Let me just run this. I'm going to get shot, aren't I? Yes.
Is someone there?
Run. I need to... Oh. They're all fighting each other. I'm trying to get it. Okay. Probably not the best level. Are we far enough away now? Okay. Yeah, okay. So in AI management, there's edit behaviors. I scroll this across, get you a view. It's this. It's pretty program art, pretty internal. I can just about use it, but it's getting a bit unwieldy as these logic patterns get larger and larger. The answer is absolutely yes. Now I've lived with it long enough, I know exactly how it needs to be relayed out, what buttons need to be always available, and the logic will stay the same. The building out of the functionality and the logic stays the same. It's just the speed at which you can create and then edit and then debug. I'm going to rearrange the UI to make that nicer. Once I get to that point, I think most people will be able to use this tool. With that, nearly everyone will be able to create their own game logic without relying on behaviors. What are behaviors? Let me show you that. If I select one of these characters and go into behaviors, it's these. These are sort of groupings of logic that do very common things, and the more that we put in, the more different things that can happen in your game. But these are just sort of like an interpretation of a particular thing that might happen. You might want to go into more detail and change how this works. Now, by changing some parameters, as you can see here, there are, for this one, melee attack, there's all these parameters you can change. You might want to go deeper and actually create your own logical blocks and your own sequences. So yeah, that's going to happen. I think it'll happen around the time of RPG, because when you start dealing with RPG and you've designed your front-end UI, let's say you've designed your own inventory screen, how does that actually work? What mechanisms are you going to have inside your inventory screen? Well, you probably want to create your own logic to control all of that. So expect to see it around that time. Sorry if my questions are being provided with answers that are extremely long, and I am eating into the clock, but I think we've still got about 5 minutes, so I think we can carry on. I'll try and truncate my answers a little bit just to move things along. Here's one from Retro Game Block. Seeing as Particle Editor has been included due to popular demand, very popular demand, will we see the Lua commands to at least at least position and scale them at some point? Yeah, they're basically closed boxes right now because the Particle Editor produces a special kind of particle data set. Now, data set is almost entirely given to the shader that eats that particle set and spits out hundreds and potentially thousands of particles on screen for performance reasons. For you to change what happens to those particles on a particle by particle basis, you kind of have to be in the shader to do that. But certainly moving the whole particle emitter around the game, I don't see why that is a big problem. This is a particle emitter, by the way. It's a little blob. And then choose based on what you've chosen, all the particles are created in and around the emitter. If you mean can we scale and position, hide and show this emitter, if it ain't already available through Lua commands, yeah, that's definitely something we need before version 1. If it ain't in the issues board, please post it. and maybe email me so I can assign it to me and set it as a high priority. Not high because it's super critical, it's just relatively quick to do, and I can imagine it being extremely useful if you can have your particles moving around with your objects. Although you can do that in other ways with something like a smart object. Sorry, that answer really wasn't as quick as I hoped it could be. Here's another question. When will Jack be added as a playable character? Well, we need characters that have 4 legs. And I think we've still got work to do on 2 legs. But yeah, there is going to be a time, probably RPG time, or maybe after V1, where you want horses that you can ride around your game for faster than walk, transport, and other things like that. But I don't know, I'm undecided as to whether to expand the character creator to animals or whether we put focus on the model importer. So you just find a horse or a dog or a wolf or whatever from a 3D asset store, bring it in, and have GameGuru Max do the conversions and rigging so it just works out the box. So we could go one of 2 ways there. It's pretty early to say, but let me know your preference in the usual social channels. Here, another question. This is from Synchro. Saw a pic of classic Cyber posted with a cool Minimax style GUI. Can we have that? Minimax style graphic user interface. I think you're talking about ImGUI. If you're talking about ImGUI, it is currently available in the GitHub, in the public repository for GameGuru Classic. It's just been undefined because it completely changes the UI for GameGuru Classic. A lot of people are used to the old UI, and if we just change it all entirely, it might upset. I don't think we've decided yet when we make that available to everyone. I think we have to decide if we're happy with what currently exists. For those that don't know, just bounce back to Classic now. This interface here, all this along the top, the menus, down the left, it's using an extremely old technology called BCG. I don't even think they sell the API anymore. Makes it very difficult to compile all the parts of GameGuru Classic and then get it out the door. ImGUI would allow us to take all this entire UI, build it into a single executable, much like Max does right now. And there's certain advantages to that, not least of which is you can have your graphic user interface elements, not just in the editor, but in test game. And the panels that pop up, that could be ImGUI. You can even have ImGUI inside your game with more font control. So there's many advantages. It's in there in its API form under an ifdef, and you can certainly check it out if you want to check out the repository. But I think it's still, the jury's out on exactly how we would introduce that as just another feature of GameGuru Classic for everyone. But it's available right now if you know a little bit of C++. Okay, we're cracking on to the half-hour mark. Let me answer 2 more questions from someone who hasn't asked me a question before, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there because it is Scorchio in this office. I think Ordway, don't think you've asked one yet. How difficult is it to add bullet time? Can it be done with Lua? Can't be done in Classic right now. Bullet time, or the best way to do bullet time, is to slow down the physics clock. So Newtonian physics is still being calculated. You just time slice it, so everything suddenly slows down. And because physics controls everything, movements of the player capsule, the characters, the objects, the crate falling off a wall, the shrapnel exploding, all that kind of stuff, all run by physics, it'll look like time is slowing down, what some people call bullet time. Because you fire a bullet, you can see it just slowly going through the scene until it hits its target. No plans to add that feature, but now it's all out in the open. The latest version of GameGuru Classic is available on the repo. Go check it out. I think I could do bullet time by changing one value in the source code. I mean, it'd be a hell of a hack, but you could see it and see if it's got some potential for adding as a feature. And everybody who's listening to my voice now is totally welcome to go into the repo and play around with the code. If you do something that, oh, that's really cool, everyone would love it, just commit it, do a pull request, I'll have a look at it. If it's great, it goes into the official version. That's kind of what it's all about. And the last question mark from someone who hasn't had a question, I think it is DK Productions. Question, please don't forget to fix multiplayer for Classic. Yeah, just for those who don't know, we're using Steam multiplayer for our multiplayer system. And if you just use stock assets, levels that only use the stock assets, in my last test, and someone may have broken it in the meantime, but in my last test, that worked fine. Anything that just like for this big escape, for example, you could actually host this big escape and you could both run around and have a nice multiplayer game. If you imported your own graphics, custom models, etc., stuff like that, that requires what's called Steam Workshop to host that asset so it can then be given to your players when they find your game and play it. That's all a bit fudgy right now. I suspect Steam changed their multiplayer API at some point and we didn't keep up with it. So that still has to be looked at. But yes, it's half broken if you're interested in custom models, etc. It may be, however, that we don't quite go down that route. Another thing that you may find if you explore the GitHub repository is an entire set of code for Photon. What is Photon, I hear you ask? Photon is a separate, completely independent multiplayer API that we used in a spin-off sister product called VRQuest. And that decouples itself from Steam. And it also had the advantage that you don't need Steam in order to use that multiplayer. And also that multiplayer is a little further along than the Steam implementation because it was done after the Steam implementation. So there is a possibility, no promises, that rather than try and repair an old Steam multiplayer system, we switch to Photon. And that'll give you, the bonus of making a multiplayer game and sharing it with your friends and not needing that friend to have Steam. Our own GameGuru Classic. Something that has been requested for years in the community. So I just mentioned that because it's what I'm thinking about. It was for mentioning it because it is in the repository now. Someone beats me to it and gets that Photon side running, let me know. Make a code commit. I'll put it into the official version. No problem. Okay, I'm scrolling down the rest of the live chat. There's still lots of questions going on, lots of excitement in this broadcast, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave it there. If you remember your question, you can ask it again next Wednesday at 7 p.m. BST, where I and my team will be happy to answer as many questions as we can grab hold of within what we hope is about a 30-minute length broadcast each week. So until next Wednesday at 7 p.m. BST, thank you for your kind attention. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay safe, stay cool, and I'll speak to you all soon. Until then, I shall say goodbye.